You are listening to Venture Beyond, Stories from Hidden Worlds. If you enjoy this episode, please leave a like down below and share with a friend. And, if you haven't already, subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode or new series and updates. Coursing through the stars, fighting pirates, hideous monsters, and the very elements themselves. It's the next daring episode of Galaxies Beyond. Number 1. That Next Horizon. This episode brought to you by Doohan Fuel. Whether you're jet-setting to Europa for a family holiday or burning a haul to Vega Prime, you can count on Doohan neutron crystals to power your star drive through the cosmos. With our 95% reliability rating, the top in the industry, can you afford to take a chance on another brand when you need it most? Trust Doohan Fuel. Give her all she's got. United Space Administration Headquarters, Earth.
Tomorrow morning's the big test. You sure about this, Captain Wells?
Director Isaac Harlow asked in his too smooth voice as he lit up a Lady Luck cigarette with his fake gold-plated lighter. Jack Wells smirked, staring at the sleek, aerodynamic steel rocket standing on its tall, sweeping stabilizing fins. Her name, the USS Odyssey, a dagger to carve into the great unknown.
Someone's got to test her, boss. There's no way I'm missing out on the first flight of our fastest and most powerful rocket yet. The Quarian drive, though, it is, by its nature, unpredictable. Folding causality, tearing a hole through space-time. It just seems like there's too much that could go wrong,
Isaac said.
I'm sure you read that report that Dr. Verne from the Advisory Council put out.
Taking a sip of Liberty Lager, Jack idly rolled the bottle cap on his knuckles as he took in the side of the rocket on the launch pad.
Can't say that I have. Of course not, the director sighed. He's concerned about how the drive works. He thinks that we don't know enough about what the drive is capable of. It could fling you way off course, send you somewhere we can't bring you back from, even send you back or forwards in time, or worse. He even has doubts that it won't do serious damage to the fabric of space.
Jack shrugged.
Come on, boss. I don't really get how that stuff works. I just pilot the ship, see how she flies, make sure she doesn't crash. I'll leave that science stuff to the lab coats. He also suggested that if it is successful, we might come into contact with a hostile alien species that could put humanity in danger,
the director said. Laughing, Jack shook his head.
Oh, maybe we'll find a planet made of ice cream. Come on, boss. Aliens? We've explored almost half of the Milky Way and haven't run into even the suggestion of life outside our planet. What if it fails?
The other man said, taking a drag and blowing out a fountain of gray-blue smoke that filled the air.
What if you get stranded?
Taking another sip of beer, Jack chuckled.
That's what the standard neutron engine is for. Maybe it'll be a longer trip back from Alpha Centauri than we hoped, but it'll make for one heck of a story. And the eggheads will get a bunch of data to work with. Worst case scenario, I'll be back in a week, he shrugged. The Odyssey's a deep space exploration ship, not a hot rod. Got all the things the team would need to be comfortable for months. A week back in her will be a breeze.
Isaac sighed.
We really should do more testing. I don't like putting a life on the line at this point, especially not my favorite test pilots. If you're so worried, why let the test go forward, boss?
Jack asked.
Politics, of course, the director said, groaning.
President Wright says he needs some kind of win to justify all the spending on research and development in the budget to Congress. Dr. McKenzie has him convinced that Project Odyssey is the win he's looking for. President won't listen to me.
He thinks I want to run against him next year. Those guys from the opposition still trying to get you to run? Isaac shrugged. They call me every week. Not sure how many times I have to tell them it's not happening before they'll get the message. Well, you'd have my vote at least. He took another sip of lager. I'll stick to the Rockets. We'll see if all this worrying and all has any merit. Can't wait to see how the Odyssey flies. It was the director's turn to chuckle this time. There isn't a scrap of fear in that rock of a head of yours, is there? Oh, I'm no stranger to fear, Jack said. He stepped away from the director's window to come sit at his desk. The pleather armchairs the man kept for visitors were comfortable, if rather cheaply made. Director Isaac Harlow was a cheapskate, but his frugality had ensured that projects at the United Space Administration always came in under budget, something that made him wildly popular with politicians on all sides of the aisle. Really? Isaac said incredulously. Just what are you afraid of? He took another drag of the cigarette, his cracked, leathery face plainly showing his disbelief. My mother's wrath, God, and dying without seeing what lies beyond that next horizon, Jack said. He finished the bottle of lager with a final sip and pocketed the bottle cap. The director laughed. Having met your mother, I can see why you put her first. Isaac reached under his desk, pulled out another Liberty lager from a hidden miniature refrigerator, and handed the bottle to Jack. With how much trouble my brothers and I caused back in the day, it's no small miracle I'm still alive. She certainly threatened to help me meet my maker enough. Jack grabbed the ice-cold bottle and popped the cap off with a snap of his wrist. I swear you gotta show me how to do that someday, Isaac said, shaking his head in disbelief while taking another drag of his cigarette. Jack smirked as he took his first sip of the smooth, semi-sweet, bready liquid. How about I show you after I get back from the test tomorrow? He held his hand out. The director smiled and shook the outstretched hand with a firm handshake. That's the deal, Captain, and I will hold you to it. You know me, boss. I never break my promises. He leaned back in the chair. I think I'll have a barbecue back at the ranch to celebrate. I'll show you then. Oh, I'm certainly not missing that Texas barbecue. I still dream about that brisket you smoked last time, Isaac said. He flicked ash off the end of his cigarette into a Bakelite ashtray. Jack grinned. Maybe you'll bring that daughter of yours. She's single now, isn't she? The director coughed in the middle of a drag, taking a moment to clear his throat. Don't even think about it, Jack. Not in a million years. Ooh, me? Jack took another sip of beer and winked. Wouldn't even dream of it. Sure, the director said, shaking his head. He looked back to the window Jack had been looking out of before. One thing's for sure. Tomorrow morning's gonna be one to remember. Regardless of what happens. That it will. Jack looked back at the Odyssey, admiring the ship as moonlight glinted on the smooth, stainless steel hull. Big day, Jack, you ready for this? Gene Corey, the equipment tech, said as he looked over Jack's form-fitting silver plasteel spacesuit. Jack chuckled. Just another day at the office, Gene. He looked over to a mirror on the wall and ran a gloved hand through his short blonde hair. He saw an eyelash or other stray hair that had fallen on his cheek under his brown eyes, and he swatted it away. The last thing he needed was something flying around in his helmet during the test. He checked his chin. Per tradition, Jack had decided not to shave this morning, so his 5 o'clock shadow from last night had evolved into a short stubble. Something always seemed to go wrong in tests where he shaved in the morning, so, even though he didn't really believe in that stuff, he'd stop shaving on test days, just in case. Right, how silly of me. Jumping to Alpha Centauri in a matter of seconds as opposed to the usual week, it's no big deal, Gene said with a smirk. He turned around to grab the transparent aluminum globe helmet, then back to hand it up to Jack. Gene was a good head shorter than Jack, and his seat on a rolling chair to look over the suit only exacerbated the height difference. He took the helmet in one last breath of crisp, cool air, then pulled the helmet over his head and locked it into place on the ring around his collar. A hiss from Jack's backpack was followed by a rush of air into the helmet. Then the hissing stopped and the air in the helmet calmed. A light on his wrist console turned green, confirming his suit was sealed and pressurized. Gene looked to the terminal next to the two of them, nodding. "All right, all green. You're all set, Captain. Thanks for the kit, Gene. I've got a date with a pretty lady outside," Jack said, turning to exit the locker room. Chuckling, Gene said, "Careful, Jack. The Odyssey's a wild one. Just gotta know what she likes, Gene. Luckily for me, she likes to go fast, just like me," he said as the door closed behind him. A long metal hallway led out to the launch pad. He stepped down the corridor until he eventually got to daylight at the end. The shimmering silver rocket was even more beautiful in the morning sunlight than she was in the moonlight. A speaker for his in-helmet radio crackled for a moment, and then the director's voice came in. "Looking good, Jack. Ready for a trip to Alpha Centauri?" "I was thinking about taking the express with a lady I know," Jack said, chuckling. The Odyssey towered over him now, a silver, almond-shaped monolith with 3 cylindrical neutron pulse aerospike engines, which each had a sweeping stabilizing fin that met the concrete of the launch pad. Steam gently rose from the 3 engines. "She isn't the prettiest girl you ever saw. Well, we've got her all ready for you. Why don't you climb in and we'll get you two on your way," Isaac said over the radio. Jack stepped onto the crane lift that led up to the Odyssey's cargo bay and flipped the switch to go up. Smooth as silk, the loading crane above him pulled him up and then into the cargo bay itself. Storage containers and pallets of supplies stood in rows on either side of the main walkway in the middle of the bay. "Like we talked about in the mission briefing last week, she's all stocked up just in case you end up having to take the long way home. Even left you some Liberty in the fridge," Isaac said. It sounded like he was shuffling through some papers on his end. Smirking, Jack said, "Stocked up the icebox too. What a pal." He walked over to the lift, seated in a transparent aluminum shaft in the middle of the cargo hold, and moved the lever over 3 levels to C for cockpit, and the lift started climbing up its glass tube. The laboratory, living, and bunk decks went by in a flash until the lift came to a stop at the top. The cockpit was much like the other rockets he had tested. Not the narrow, focused precision of the fighter planes he had flown in the war. The Odyssey had a single seat set with switchboards, displays, and a large window of transparent aluminum in front. 2 additional stations sat empty that could be used by other crew members for weapons, science, or engineering control as needed. Stepping off the lift, he walked to the front and settled into the comfortable leather helm control station seat and breathed a sigh of relief. He'd finally be back in the only home he'd ever known, other than the family ranch in Texas, space. It was time to get to work. "Alright, flight, I'm beginning the startup sequence." "Copy, Jack. You are cleared to begin," Chief Engineer Chandra said back over the radio. He started flipping switches for the various ship systems and calling them back to the flight team as he went. "Main reactor on. Releasing primary power conduit locks. Secondary fusion reactor is spooling up. Emergency backup battery failsafe is on. Life support on. Purging engines of excess coolant and starting warm-up burn." The ship started to gently hum with that last switch. The chief engineer chimed in a moment later. "You've got lit torches, Jack. Proceed." "Thanks, Chief." "Alright. Releasing secondary power conduit locks. Main computer is on. Navigation on. Engineering control on. Damage control on. AIC on. Communications on. Switching suit antenna to ship. Testing.
The communications lead replied, "Loud and clear, Cap. We're getting telemetry now. Continue with final startup."
Weapons main power hub on. Secondary hub on. Deflectors on. Sensor suite on. Helm control on. Inertial dampers on. Quarian drive is powered and ready. Flight. USS Odyssey is ready for launch.
Jack smirked as he said the last part, his heart racing in his chest.
Copy, Jack. Remember, there's only enough quarium in the drives for 2 jumps. 1 out to Alpha Centauri and 1 back. That's all the refined quarium in the entirety of the United Earth colonies. Of course, that will completely change with a successful test. Just remember, this isn't a sightseeing tour of the cosmos. You're jumping to Alpha Centauri and back home, hopefully.
Concern was back in the director's voice again. Jack nodded, even though Isaac couldn't see it through the radio.
No worries, boss. After all, I've got a barbecue to get ready for tomorrow.
The director chuckled.
All right, Captain Wells. The skies and launch pad are clear. You may begin the launch countdown on your mark.
Roger, flight. Let's get this show on the road, Jack said, his right hand gripping the flight control stick while his left flipped open a glass door covering a large red button labeled Launch and a red painted switch labeled Engine Limiters. Isaac responded,
"All hands, launch sequence is now beginning. 10, 9, 8, 7, release limiters."
Jack flipped the limiter switch and felt the whole ship thrum with energy as the neutron pulse engines flared.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Odyssey launch.
Pressing the red power button, Jack felt the Odyssey truly come alive. The engines erupted with power beneath him as the rocket roared into the air. The launch pad, a flock of birds, clouds, and even the clear blue morning sky gave way to a sea of black and white above as she cruised effortlessly into the sea of stars. The sound of cheering filled Jack's helmet as he heard Isaac say,
"We have a successful launch. The Odyssey is off."
"She rides like a dream, boss. I can certainly get used to this,"
Jack said as he eased off on the throttle to set the Odyssey into cruise. He looked over the status board to his left, a panel of lights and labels.
"All green lights on the board, flight."
The chief engineer responded,
"We see all green also, Jack. Go ahead and open her up. Let's see how she takes a full burn."
Jack chuckled, almost giddy with excitement.
"Don't have to ask me twice."
And he gradually pushed the throttle levers up to maximum. As he did, he sank further into his chair and felt his weight bear down more and more. Eventually, the inertial dampeners caught up and the sensation eased. Now at full power, he laughed as he saw the moon flash by in the blink of an eye. The Odyssey had to be, by far, the fastest ship he had ever flown.
"Think I'm in love, boys. You sure I gotta bring her back?"
"Sure, Jack. Just hand me a cool billion in labor, materials, and R&D costs and we'll call it even,"
the director said with a laugh.
Would you take an IOU?
Jack replied. Mars and her cities streaked by like a bug in a hurricane.
"Afraid the government doesn't take IOUs, it only gives them,"
the director said. Jack was sure, with that grin of his.
"Go ahead and ease her back into cruise, Jack."
As ordered, he pulled the levers back to the middle notch. He glanced over at the temperature gauges for each engine and the reactors. They had barely raised from their normal operation range.
"Geez, flight, barely even broke a sweat." "That's good. Looks like those new neutron engines are working great,"
Isaac said, then cleared his throat before saying,
"All right, Jack, time for the main event. Just like we talked about, there's 3 switches you need to flip to engage the Quarian drive. Switch 1 will allow you to set the destination. Jack took his left hand off the throttle and opened another glass panel that covered the 3 switches. He flipped the first one, and a targeting reticle appeared on a display to his left with a map of the Milky Way. With a few keystrokes on a number pad, he typed in the standard navigational code for Alpha Centauri, 333-15295, and the reticle blipped over to the familiar trio of stars.
Target set, flight.
Now, the second switch will spool the drive. When it is ready, the light above the switch will turn green. The director sounded so serious now. He had to be sweating bullets on the other end of the line. He could feel a strange whirring and intermittent buzz when he flipped the second switch that slowly became more rapid. After a minute or so, the light flickered green, though it wasn't steady.
The light isn't staying green. Is that a problem?
The director said. Hold on a second. And Jack could hear the radio go silent. After a moment, he came back on.
It could be a faulty light, Jack. Chandra says once it's at full power, there should be nothing to worry about. You just don't want to activate the drive when it's only partially spooled. Everything looks good over here.
Alright. Well, are we ready to see if this thing works? Jack said. If the engineer wasn't worried, he wasn't.
Affirmative, Jack. Flip the switch. We'll talk in Alpha Centauri,
the director said. Taking a deep breath, Jack said,
"How about a dance, pretty lady?"
And he flipped the third switch. The whirring and buzzing grew stronger and louder until it felt like he and the ship were falling off a cliff. As they plummeted, there was a sensation that he and the Odyssey were being stretched and pulled like pasta dough. It wasn't painful, but there was an unshakable wrongness to it all. Then they were twisted and slung down a hole that was darker than dark. And then he felt as though his ears popped. The whirring and buzzing was gone, and the darkness bled into a wash of red light. A red light he knew very well. It was Proxima Centauri. Just over the horizon of the red dwarf, he could see the other 2 much brighter stars of Alpha Centauri. It really worked. A crackle came over the radio, but he couldn't make it out. He turned the dial on the ship's antenna, adjusting the frequency to the comm buoy at Alpha Centauri. The signal came and went until he barely heard Isaac's voice say,
Jack, are you there? Did you make it? Please come in."
"Better get the champagne ready, boss. We've got a lovely view of 3 burning balls of gas over here," Jack said as casually as he could manage. Excitement swelled in him, threatening to burst out of his chest. The roar of cheers he heard over the radio would be deafening if it wasn't so sweet. After a moment, the director said, nearly breathlessly,
"Congratulations, Captain Wells. You are now the fastest man alive."
With a broad grin, Jack said, "It's an honor."
"This will change everything, Jack. Everything. Days, weeks of time traveling, gone. No more month to Vega. No more long hauls to the Verne Cluster. The entire cosmos is just a blink away."
The director sounded more excited than Jack had ever heard him. So much for all those worries.
"How about I jump back so we can talk about it in person?"
Jack suggested.
"Absolutely. Go ahead and follow the same procedure,"
Isaac said. Jack nodded.
"You got it, boss. Flipping the first switch?"
And he did, typing in the navigation code for Earth, 00000001, and watched the reticle blip over to home.
"Alright, time for number 2,
Jack said as he toggled the switch. He waited for the light to flicker green again. It seemed to take a bit longer this time.
"Okay, boss, it's flickering again, but I've got a green light over here. Come on home, Jack. You and your little lady have a celebration to get to,"
the director said. Jack flipped the switch, and the same sensations returned. He fell, stretched, pulled, and twisted until he fell into an abysmal pit. And then, again,
Like his ears popped, the whirring and buzzing was gone, and the darkness bled into a sea of stars. He breathed a sigh of relief for a breath he didn't know he had been holding. "Hope you left some champagne for me, boss." He waited for a moment for a response, but didn't even hear a crackle over the radio. Suddenly he realized that his radio was still tuned to the frequency of the comm buoy out at Alpha Centauri, so he switched it back to Earth frequency and said, "Scared myself there for a second. Forgot to switch the radio back from Alpha Centauri. Y'all haven't started the party without me, have you?" Again, he was greeted only by silence. He looked at the status board and, sure enough, the communication systems were on with a green light. Had the whole control room just abandoned their post to start the party? Maybe something had happened to their comms antenna. Shrugging, he pulled the flight stick to the side to turn the ship around towards Earth, but instead of the familiar blue marble, he saw a bright green moon around a bright pink gas giant. That wasn't right. What? I've never seen that before. His eyes darted over to the navigation display, but it was blank. The reticle sat in a blank, black screen. Oh, again. He tried switching the navigation systems off and then back on, but got the same results. "Isaac, this isn't a funny joke. Not sure how you did this, but I'd like to get home, if you don't mind." Again, there was no response. He started trying different frequencies on the radio. Boss? Boss? Please come in. Hello? Anyone?" Suddenly, the whole ship shook as if it had been struck. "What in the blazes?" A feminine voice blared over the radio in a language he couldn't understand. "Feleneres nus mikalla, velikopon shafrino, vasta!" "Hello? I can't understand you. Do you speak English?" he asked, looking out of the window to see if he could see what hit him. The ship shook again. This time a yellow light flashed for the deflector on the status board. The same voice came again, more insistent. "Vasta melonkashi, sivana banakashino, vasta!" Perhaps they were telling him to stop? He decided to try it and pulled the throttle control to idle. As he did, a most unexpected sight came, as what seemed to be like an old sailing ship with glowing orange sails swept over the Odyssey and came to a stop a few 100 feet away. A single cannon and a turret turned towards him, with what seemed to be a red gambeson armored figure pointing at him. Through the glass of the window and the glass of the strange figure's helmet, he could see lavender skin, white hair, and what looked to be pointed ears and teal eyes. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Is that an alien? Special thanks to Fulfill Your Destiny for being a paid subscriber on Substack. Your contribution makes this show possible, and I cannot thank you enough for your support. If you would like to be featured in the show's special thanks, as well as other perks, please check out my Substack link in my Linktree. Words cannot express how much I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to see what I've been working on, and I truly hope to see you again soon. Until next time, good fortune, good health, and good day.